Okay, Kosha Gada is an American businesswoman, managing director at Recastled. She's an expert on this stuff in America, and she joins me now. Kosha, thank you so much for your time. The Biden family business, like the Biden administration, I've got to say, seems to be in shambles. How much more is going to unravel in this sad tale?
It is the one-year anniversary of what I think President Trump had termed the laptop from hell. So I think it was exactly a year ago, October 2020, where the New York Post broke that story, covered it quite extensively. And then, as you mentioned, the entire system, from fellow traditional media outlets to big tech, sort of arrayed against them. And I think the revelations from this week don't really add anything fundamentally to the story. It's expanding the public's understanding of what's going on here. They're going to dig more, and that will run its course. But I think the fundamentals are the two takeaways that you mentioned, Cory, and you're spot on with them. There's a reason why trust in the institution of media and journalism is at an all-time low, certainly in the U.S. and elsewhere. And this sort of illustrates that or refreshes our memory for why that is. And then the second thing is trust in public institutions more broadly, and this idea of corruption in politics, which is as old as politics itself. The Bidens are certainly not the first people to be embroiled in this. They won't be the last. But it does raise a question about what, if anything, we should be demanding of our elected representatives and what guardrails we should have in place to safeguard against the actual corruption or the perception of corruption, which is also very corrosive to society. Much was made of this in the previous administration, since Trump was the first outsider, billionaire businessman with a lot of business interests to win the presidency. There was a lot of discussion about emoluments clauses and should he liquidate his businesses, should he put them in a blind trust, et cetera. And I think this just further raises that about what guardrails we should have in place for corruption. Both some are certainly more on the nose than others, but the system, increasingly people are thinking the system is not working fairly for the people.
Yeah, Kosha, I think that's a reasonable conclusion, but let's think about it like this. In America, they have term limits for presidents, and I suspect they have that for a very good reason. You might be able to explain precisely why. But then you have professional politicians like Joe Biden, who's always been on a very average salary, who's been there for 50-odd years. He's now a very, very wealthy man, and you certainly don't get wealth like that through saving 10% of your salary every year and investing it particularly wisely. You've got people like Nancy Pelosi, whose husband's got a 100% batting record for all his stock trades that he details through his wife's disclosure returns. Is it time that America considered term limits for congressmen and senators as well as presidents?
Yeah, this is an age-old debate. The term limits for the presidents, I think the founders, it was viewed as one safeguard against sort of this perpetual quest for power, basically, and when they were framing the Constitution, and the counter-argument for that, for why the legislative branch and the judicial branch did not have term limits, was because they thought that it takes away, if you're constantly campaigning because you're up for election all the time and you have that term limit, then it maybe takes away from what you could do in terms of the fundamental issues that you're questioning. But yeah, there's a debate around this all the time. There are instances of it. So in Texas, for instance, it's not term limits, but they have part-time at the state legislature level. So not the United States Senate, but the state level, they have part-time aspects to it. And they do have some term limits at the local level. And, that debate is ongoing. I think the other issue too, Cory, and what you're raising with Pelosi and others, Biden and others, is there's also this idea of legalized corruption, where maybe people aren't explicitly breaking laws that are on the books, but there's this revolving door of people who formerly held public office or their associates having the red carpet rolled out for them in terms of corporate board seats, media contracts, jobs at white shoe firms as lobbyists, donations to their philanthropic ventures, or in Hunter Biden's case this past week, his newfound interest as an artist, and people selling and buying his prints, I think, for $75,000 a pop. And so there is something even around that should there be bans around, maybe a lifetime ban even, of joining these types of positions after you've left public office. But, as you know, it's very hard to get anything passed and to change the system.